It is the Beaver Banter Podcast. My name is CJ Baumgartner. Ian Rivers, my co-host. And Ian, we got a guest on the podcast today, although not on the video feature. He's joining us on the line, I guess, so to speak. Ian, why don't you introduce him?
Yeah, this is Chase Connors. I believe it's Connors, correct?
Connor, yep.
Chase Connor, okay. And Chase is how should I introduce it? A long-time Beaver hockey fanatic, basically.
Essentially, I've been going to games for I don't even know how long now.
Right. Yeah. So, he's been a long-time supporter of the show. We interact with Chase a lot during game day, that sort of thing. So we figured, hey, let's get him on and let's talk some BSU hockey with him because when is there not something going on with this hockey team? Just played in Houghton this last weekend after a week off. And, I think it's one of those instances where you go into the weekend and I think you tell me beforehand that we come out with 2 points. I'm going to very reluctantly say, okay, at least we didn't get swept. That was my big fear. But it's, again, kind of like last year, shades of 2022, 23, giving up that goal with 4.9 seconds on the clock and giving up only 1 point, thankfully. But again, it's to Michigan Tech, who is right there on your heels now. That we'll see how that goes down the stretch because that goal could be a very big impact. It could have a very big impact on where the Beavers end up at the end of the season. But what are your opinions? I know you didn't get a huge chance to watch this weekend, Chase, but what were your opinions on this weekend's games?
I kind of went back and watched on Flow, just not only the highlights, but I think I watched all of Saturday's game. And to me, they got out. I don't want to say outplayed. They definitely got outshot, but I mean, defensively, we were outplaying them. We hung in there most of the game, and like you said, with 4 seconds left, we couldn't hold on. Which usually we are the ones coming back, and teams can't hold on against us. Not the case Saturday night, but there's nights where we look slow and dead. Nights where we look like we're just hanging in there. Nights where we're outplaying them, and I thought we were just right there. Despite I don't think that shot count told the story of the game. I think it was like 46-21. I don't think the shot count told the full story of the game.
48-25, the shot count.
Okay. Still, I don't think it really, you look at that and you think Tech dominated. I don't really think Tech dominated that game too much.
No, I don't think either game was dominated by Michigan Tech. I mean, you're kind of used to seeing Bemidji State win games while being outshot. It's just kind of the way that they've played, even when we have better teams than this one. More often than not, I feel like you're seeing Bemidji State on the lower end of the shot totals. But yeah, I mean, even in a loss on Friday, it didn't really feel like we played that terribly. It just didn't feel like we played quite well enough. The goals didn't come when we needed them to. But yeah, then again on Saturday, I mean, yeah, it sucks to give that up, but I think that we played pretty well this weekend. It's probably a little unfortunate. I think if you get 3 points out of it, you're like, yeah, that seems appropriate. These teams played pretty evenly matched, and now it just seems a little bit lopsided because of the fact that that game ended in a tie and you dropped some points. And, it hurts especially because I think if you go through this weekend, you get 3 points. Almost everybody that's in that top 5 that's in that race with you got 3 points. Mankato and St. Thomas also got 3 points. If you would have gotten 3 points, that meant Tech would have gotten 3 points, and Lake State would only have gotten 1 point on the weekend. So it would have been a little bit better of a result just because now you're moving things 1 week forward and you now are in the same spot essentially. But I mean, we're playing the wait and see game at this point. Like you said, I think we have weekends where the Bowling Green series kind of just came out of nowhere. I think that was the most shocking to me, to just see them absolutely dominate Bowling Green all weekend. And then, you come out against Ferris State, and obviously there's some injury issues, and we're still missing the World Junior guys, but it was a little bit not as convincing there in on the road. So maybe it's a home and away thing. I don't know, but I know that Matthias Scholl played out of his mind this weekend. You're quite a big supporter of Matthias Scholl. He won another CCHA Goaltender of the Week award. But yeah, I think without Scholl and net, this weekend looks a lot different.
100%, especially like with what we've seen, not just this year, but past years where we don't really get support with that backup goaltending. Not saying Enright can't steal us a game. He has, but he's not exactly someone you can rely on, whereas Scholl, it seems like the team plays so much more confident in front of him, and you can just tell that the trust is there with him. You need a big save, he'll get you a big save. And like I said, ever since his freshman year, I've been Matthias Scholl's #1 supporter, and that will stay the same until he leaves this program.
CJ, you got anything?
No, you guys have got the great hockey thing. I'll keep you rolling here.
All right. So right now it's a hell of a tight race. We have 8 games left, 4 weekends in conference play. We have obviously a weekend off here, and then we play Augustana, which won't count for any CCHA standings. What is your outlook on the rest of this season? And obviously in such a tight race, we'll have to see some teams will get caught up to us on games played this weekend when we have games off. What's your outlook? Where do you think the Beavers are going to end up in the grand scheme of things?
It's tough to say. Obviously, if you look at the last 3 years with what's happened after January with this team, you would assume 4th, 5th, 6th with even how tough. I mean, Bowling Green is still less than 10 points behind us, and they're in 6th. Same thing in Northern Michigan, who's in 7th, less than 10 points behind. But I think this year, especially with, to me, it looks a little bit different because we're going to have Judding coming back soon. We're going to have Lope coming back soon. We're going to have Engstrom coming back soon. We're getting guys back, whereas I don't think the last 2-3 years we've gotten people back down that stretch where we just collapsed. So I think with the bolster back, I mean, obviously Augustana, if we come out of there with less than 3 points, that's not good. And that'll probably change my outlook a little bit. But I think we can take multiple from Northern Michigan and Ferris State. And then the final 2 weekends, the most important, St. Thomas and Minnesota State, the #1 and #3 team in the conference. Those are ones where I think if they play their hockey, both those games, we've owned Minnesota State the last 3-4 series we played them in, I believe. I think we're 4-2, 5-2 against them in our last 6 games, something along those lines. And then St. Thomas, I mean, those are games where you can take upwards of 6 points. And I think no less than 3. If they play the way they should be able to get home ice for this playoff run.
Yeah, it seems to me that you've got to win probably 6 games. And then, if you don't win 6, you want to take points from anything else you lose. I think you're going to have to get up around that 45-ish point mark to really have a good shot at winning the CCHA. Of course, Augustana will not count for any conference points. They don't fully enter point territory until 2 years from now, I believe. So that game is kind of like a non-conference, but in conference game. It's a little bit like St. Cloud State. Yeah, you want to win it, but the main thing I'm taking from that series is just don't get more hurt, because like you said, those 3 players, especially, there's very important players. Engstrom only a freshman, but he adds an important offensive element to this team. And then Kyle Loft and Jackson Judding are 2 of maybe the most important players for this team that you might be getting back 2 to 3 weeks from now. So get through that series, and then that would be the 3-week mark is Northern Michigan going on the road to the UP, where you might have a lot of key contributors back as you're trying to make this late season push. And I think you're right. Northern Michigan has not looked super solid this year. I think they just took 3 points off of, or no, they just took, 3 points, off of St. Thomas this last weekend, who is, of course, leading the CCHA. But those are going to be the games you have to get points in, is Northern Michigan and Ferris State. And then you're going to want to see where you are, because those teams, St. Thomas and Minnesota State right now, are in first and third, sandwiching Bemidji State. I think that the Beavers will probably end up with, I think, a top 3 seed. I think that they can do enough, especially with players coming back, to get a top 3 seed. It's just going to be, can this team play consistently enough down the stretch to get a couple of sweeps and truly contend for that CCHA title? Because we haven't seen anybody do it. St. Thomas with 30 points at 10-6 in the CCHA is the only team that's shown a half of a shred of consistency at times, and even they got swept last weekend. Split last weekend with Northern Michigan. So it's completely up in the air, and I think that we're going to have to just kind of wait and see. This weekend, there's not too much action. You've got Michigan Tech going to Sault Ste. Marie to take on Lake Superior State. So maybe you're hoping Lake State can take some points off the Huskies and help you out there. And then Minnesota State plays at home against Northern Michigan. That's it for terms of conference games that will get points. So obviously you're rooting for Northern Michigan to get points there. But if Northern Michigan ends up sweeping, they will only be 3 points behind Bemidji State with the same amount of games played. So that just tightens it up even more. It's going to be a tall task for the Beavers come a stretch. And yeah, I mean, the one thing that worries me is just the history that we've seen the last 2 seasons, kind of a collapse in the new year. And of course, a couple years ago, it was not quite as tight a race, and the Beavers got a sweep of St. Thomas on the last weekend of the year. So they were able to kind of right the ship and get 3rd place, and then they went on a little postseason run. So it didn't seem like it was as big of a collapse as it was last year when you fell from 1st to 5th, lost home ice, and then, of course, we know what happened in the playoffs. It wasn't very pretty. So, yeah, I mean, I think that this team can make a run. I think it's going to be very important to try and avoid the same side of the bracket as St. Thomas, because that's something that we haven't touched on much because we've been pretty early in the season. But St. Thomas ineligible for the NCAA tournament. So if you get into the CCHA tournament, even if St. Thomas wins the regular season, you're going to want to be a 2 or a 3 seed so that you're on the opposite side of the bracket as the Tommies. Because if you meet the Tommies in the championship game, you're going to the NCAA tournament, win or lose. So that's something that we'll keep an eye on as the season ticks on. But yeah, I mean, any other thoughts right now, Chase, on the state of this team and anything you've seen over the last month or so?
I guess to me, even with the injuries that they've gotten, I don't think we've played that's why I think we can take the conference, because I don't think we've played necessarily that bad, missing guys like Polkamp and Magnus into the World Juniors. Obviously, the St. Cloud series was very disappointing. And I don't even want to talk about that because I was at the Friday night game and it was ugly. But beating Ferris State 4-1 without Kyle Loaf, without Judding, without these guys taking some points from Michigan Tech, even with the guys out, I don't think we've played necessarily bad. I think it shows we can hang in there and steal points without key crucial guys that are important to the team. And I think with those guys coming back, if they play their game the way they are supposed to play, they can take the conference. That's my view of it, but it all depends on if they show up to play. And another thing that I've been very critical about, they can't get out coached. They cannot get out coached. That's one of my biggest things is we've lost games this year because the coaching is just, I don't really know the right words, but they just get out coached. And I think if your coaching is there, your play is there, they'll take the conference. If you're getting out coached, you can say bye-bye to the season.
Well, you kind of mentioned it with the, it feels like they haven't quite played that complete game yet. And in the moments and in the little bits we've seen them play really, really good hockey, we see all kind of the underbelly that there is a good hockey team in there. But like you said, we just haven't seen that come to fruition, whether it be injuries and people just kind of hitting their stride. But like you guys said, there's a good chance that this thing could kind of all come together at the right time over the next couple months.
Yeah, I think it's very important that that happens because, like Chase said earlier, last year we lost those players in the middle of the season and we didn't get them back. So we have an opportunity where we might get some of these guys back to make a postseason run, and that's a big benefit. And I agree that this team has not played bad. I mean, you look at the overall record at 9-14-1, and you're looking really ugly on the season, but really what we're focused on because of how bad the out of conference has gone for every team in the conference. You're looking at 8-7-1. That's a tick above 500, and really what should be 9-7-1 if we could have just won one face off. Mr. Leighton Road, who is playing out of position while he's doing that, but yeah, if they could have won that face off, they might have taken 3 from Michigan Tech. But yeah, I absolutely think they can win this conference. They've got a week off to get healthy here. Then you've got a game against Augustana. And I think if they can stay healthy going down the stretch, they have as good a shot as anybody. You just got to hope that over the course of those games, nobody else gets too super hot. Because how exciting would it be have that last weekend of the year against Minnesota State at home in the Sanford Center, and to be able to be playing for some hardware like they were back in, I believe 2020 would have been the last time they were truly in competition for the regular season title, because that was an electric atmosphere. I was at those games. That would be pretty sweet to replicate that.
Yeah, and I think we've pretty much kind of said what we needed to say on the men's hockey. Let's flip it over and talk a little women's hockey quickly. Ian, I know that they had a chance to get some local TV on Saturday, and you were able to watch that game, but we kind of knew that they were running into a buzzsaw a little bit against 4-5 Minnesota. They lost 0-2 on Friday night, lost 1-3 on Saturday afternoon. But overall, I think when you especially compare it to the first time that they played Minnesota, things looked a lot different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just this team is improving like very quickly in front of our eyes. We said that about the Duluth series, how it looked a little bit better, even, considering the Otis 7 loss on Saturday night. You come back home and you've got games against a top 5 team in the country. And, for the most part, what we need is goal scoring, because over the last now 5 games, we've scored a total of 1 goal. So that's really the issue. But at the same time, you're playing these teams that are uber talented, and you just want to make sure you're playing sound defense and you get good goaltending. And I think that's the one thing is we haven't given, I believe it's Eva Filipova, enough of her flowers yet this year on this show, because she has been outstanding in the net, and she was a big part as to why Minnesota only scored 5 goals on the weekend. Because I got an opportunity to watch most of that Saturday game against Minnesota, where it was 1-3, and for a majority of the game the Beavers were either leading or in a 1-goal game or a tie game, because she stopped a ton of grade A chances for the Gophers in that game. So I think that, now you're coming up on a series against St. Thomas. You're still at home. Tickets are again $2. So if you're in the Bemidji area and you want to go to these games against St. Thomas, who is right now right at the bottom of the conference with the Beavers. And like we said, this is one of the things we're looking for. If you can come out and get a sweep this weekend, really give yourself something to build upon, get those 4th and 5th wins of the season. I think that you're extremely happy with how this second half of the season has started out, getting a win over Robert Morris and then putting in 3 good games in 4 here. I would say the only one that really disappoints me is the Minnesota Duluth 0-7 loss. Everything else has been pretty good. All things considered, you're playing top 7 teams in the country the last 5 games. So you really can't be too disappointed with how things have gone, and especially with Filipova standing on her head in the net, doing her best impression of Matthias Scholl.
Yeah, and it's funny because we look at where the team is at and they play all of these top 10 teams all of the time, and that can do one of a couple things for your team. It can either slowly raise the level of play, like understand this is the level of hockey we have to play at night in and night out, or it can completely just ruin your confidence and set your team back a little bit. And last year is where we saw the second part of that. Last year is where we saw the constant grind of playing a top 10 team, and they just faltered down the stretch. And now we're seeing the opposite of that, which is they're raising their level of play to the level of play around them, which is really fun to see. And we get this interesting parallel now because the last time they played St. Thomas was in December, early December. They ended up splitting. That was down in Mendota Heights, but they have an opportunity now to really show us. This is kind of like a bellwether for them, not to see like gauge how good they are against a really good team, but they split when they still were trying to figure things out. Now, as they're playing much better hockey, how much better do they look? That's going to be the really fun part to watch.
Yeah, I want to bring Chase in here if he's got anything to say. Because last year, Chase, this was pretty ugly. Most weekends did not go the way the Beavers wanted. Especially there's a couple weekends there where you give up over 20 goals on the weekend and maybe you scored one or two. What do you think the improvement's been this year? And any opinions on the state of women's hockey right now?
Yeah, I'll pay attention to the women's team, see how they're doing, and obviously I'll support them. Do I watch the games a lot? No, but one thing that, again, Filipova, I have no words for her because lights out. She was lights out in that Gopher series. I don't think I've seen a Beaver goalie dominate a series, and they didn't win, but I don't think I've seen a Beaver goalie dominate a series against the Gophers like she did in a long time. And you can see, like I think CJ said, you can see the confidence building. You can see that they are improving in front of us, regardless if it shows on the win-loss sheet. You can see because the last time they played Minnesota, it was 9-2 and 9-1. This time it's 2-0, 3-1. You would think that teams like Minnesota only get better as the season goes on. Well, so does Bemidji State, and it showed this weekend by far. And regardless if the goal scoring isn't there yet, you've got to be happy with what you got in Filipova. And it just shows that next season, if she shows up like this again, you have a bright spot right there that you can definitely build around and capitalize on.
And there's another thing too with the series this weekend, of course, it being on Fox 9 Plus, there was an effort to get people out to the rink with the $2 tickets and trying to incentivize all that. Ian, from watching on TV, what did you see? What was the atmosphere like watching it on TV at the Sanford Center?
It was a lot better than I think a vast majority of what women's hockey games have been in the past. I know that, we've had discussions about attendance for that, for those events in the past. But, they dropped down to $2 tickets and it got people in the door. I don't know how accurate it is, but the attendance for Saturday's game says 890, and that's got to be a lot more than they're used to seeing. And it did look like there was more people in there. And I'm sure that that's partially because Gopher women's hockey fans do travel better than probably most in the conference.
They're a top 5 team. People want to watch them.
Exactly. They have a pretty solid fan base themselves. So that probably added to those numbers a little bit. But I do think that helped. It got people in the building. And I think it's a lot easier to get up for a game and to play motivated when you got people in the crowd watching you. So that's a big thing. And I think the only other thing is Saturday, really the main thing that hurt the Beavers was the amount of power play opportunities they gave to the Gophers. The Gophers went 2 for 4 on the power play, including the first and second goals they scored in the second and third periods. So if they can do a better job of staying out of the box, kind of staying out of their own way, they might have had a chance to take some points off the Gophers. But yeah, it's tough because when you're playing these teams that are top 7, top 5 in the country, and pretty soon, turning the corner after the St. Thomas series, they're going to have Ohio State and Wisconsin on the docket. So it's not going to get any easier after that. You're just playing teams that are so uber talented that you kind of play a little bit of a shell defensively. You're trying to play sound defensively, and you lose sight of the goal scoring. So if you don't pick up that second goal, it gets really hard to hold these teams to just one goal to try to shoot for a tie or even shut them out. It makes it really, really tough to do that. But I think that we're growing as the season goes along. And, if we can get some points here against St. Thomas, I'm gunning for a sweep because I think the Beavers are playing really well right now. The Tommies only have 6 points on the season, just like the Beavers do. So let's try to get up there. We want to try to be right now. Minnesota is the 3rd seed, and I think we fared well against Minnesota this year. So if you can put yourself in a good position to play maybe Minnesota instead of Wisconsin or Ohio State come the first round of the tournament, maybe, just maybe, you have a chance to take a game off of them in a tournament format. We'll see. That's more of a discussion for later on. But yeah, super, super happy with the way that women's hockey's played here coming out in January.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think as we wrap up our time here with Chase in this podcast, I think let's bring him back in. And Chase, you have an interesting perspective on Beaver hockey and Beaver athletics than myself and Ian do, just because me and Ian are college students at Bemidji State. That's how we first came to know the Beavers. I had some relatives that worked in the college, so I kind of knew of Bemidji State, and I maybe went to a basketball game. But you got to grow up in northern Minnesota and be around Bemidji State athletics and specifically Bemidji State hockey. What's your relationship been with these programs growing up, and what's it like now? Just what's that been like?
Yeah, I grew up in Cass Lake, so that was about 15 minutes away from Bemidji, and my dad, I think I was about 6 or 7 when he got season tickets to Beaver hockey games, and we went to every single home game until I was about 14 and I had to travel for hockey. We stopped, but I always followed him. And my dad said, he goes, you follow the team more than I do. And he goes, at least it gives you something to do. It keeps me out of trouble. And I went to a few basketball games when I was a kid, but I was never a basketball fan. So I'd go to football games a lot. I'd go to baseball games a lot. I went recently against, I think it was Winona State, either 2 years ago when BSU got their first home NCAA football game. I went to that and freezing cold, but it just, being from Bemidji and my parents, my dad had a football scholarship from BSU. He didn't go, but my mom was from Grand Forks. So she tried raising me as a UND fan, but being that close to Bemidji and being that close to a college with a D1 hockey team, I had no other choice but to root for them. And it's been awesome to be a fan, because especially with the football team, I am so proud of what that program has been able to do. As a kid growing up, when I was really little, they weren't really that good, but Bolte hits this program and things just take off. And my dad, even he was saying, he goes, back when I had my scholarship, they were winning maybe 1-2 games a season. Now here they are, back-to-back NCAA tournaments. And the hockey team, I went to the Frozen. I was really little, but I went to the Frozen Four in Washington. That was really fun. So being that close to the college and being able to see the programs from just on a weekend basis, where I'm always there, always on campus, or I'm always at the games, it's been an awesome ride. And I'm grateful. I'm a BSU fan. I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah, and you got to experience that Frozen Four season. I remember hearing about it. I remember it was a story, kind of heard in passing. But what was being in Bemidji like during that time when they got to the Frozen Four, being around that area?
From what I remember, I was still a kid, but from what I remember, there was a buzz that I haven't seen in Bemidji since, I guess, Hockey Day Minnesota 2019. Was, I guess, the closest feeling he had to that, because once the team beat, I think they beat Cornell to go to the Frozen. No, was it Cornell? I know they beat Notre Dame in the first game, but I think it was Cornell they beat in round 2. And that's when people were just there's something, this is Cinderella type run. They were the last seed. The NCAA hockey tournament had never seen a last seed come in and beat the number 1. And I think Cornell was number 2 as well. So to walk into the Frozen Four like that against, Boston University, and obviously Vermont, I guess, was kind of an underdog, and Miami of Ohio, Rico Blossie's a hell of a coach, still is a hell of a coach today. But, have that walk in and the city of Bemidji realizing that, hey, one of our teams is on one of the biggest stage in college sports. I remember the buzz was just, it was electric. Hockey Day Minnesota is the closest I think I've seen to that. And that's something I won't ever forget. And being out there and seeing the support in Washington, that's something too, where I've never seen out of state. I don't think I've seen more support for Beaver sports than that. And it was an awesome feeling. And I cannot wait for the day that happens again, because it will be special.
Yeah, I just think about, what if the Beavers last year had replaced Minnesota State and gone to that Fargo regional? That would have been so fun to see them go out there and do that. And I mean, I remember the year they won the McNaughton Cup, going to purchase tickets for the semifinal WCHA games where they eventually lost to Bowling Green. But I remember being in the ticket office before the game and all the buzz about like, and that's what people were bringing up was that Frozen Four. They're like, yeah, only like 7 wins away from another Frozen Four or 5 wins away or whatever it was. I'm like, dude, let's focus on like winning tonight. You know what I'm talking like, but that's what that Frozen Four meant to that community. And I do know that still was a very big deal for them. And I'm hoping, like you just said, we can get back to that level of play at some point. Right now we're focused on taking home some more hardware in the regular season and then maybe winning a CCHA tournament championship to get back to the NCAA tournament. And then, who knows what we can do from there. But yeah, I mean, that's awesome to be able to grow up around it. I grew up around Gopher hockey, and that's really what I watched. So I watched Bemidji State whenever they would play the Gophers. And I do remember that tournament run, but I didn't watch it super closely just because, if the Gophers weren't in it, I wasn't watching. And so that's kind of my background, but I wish that I would have had more of an understanding of what Bemidji State was and what they would eventually become to me so that I could have had some sort of knowledge of that back then.
Yeah, I mean, just the thing about that Frozen Four run was so special. And the fact that they got so close in 2021 when they beat Wisconsin and they were just one game away. I remember me and you, Ian, were talking about like, if they go, like, are we really going to do this thing? Like that would have been really fun if that would have ended up happening. But, for that, and in 2020, it felt like that was a team that was capable of getting to the NCAA tournament, and COVID, of course, wiped that away. That's another team that I think had a chance. So they've had their runs in the past. It's just a matter of it actually coming to fruition.
I would forever be on 2019-2020 season never got canceled. That DSU team makes the Frozen Four. I think the season ended. I think the was ranked 11th in USCHO rankings, and Driscoll was playing out of his mind. He had a lot of offensive production, and I think that was the year Owen Pillinger had almost for getting a sophomore year. I think if you go into the NCAA tournament that year and you play a whole year, I think that Beavers team makes it to a Frozen Four. And obviously next season, again, one of the happiest of my life, kind of COVID also ruined that too. It wasn't the biggest fan experience for that tournament run. Obviously, I think BSU was in take hit that particular region. Still, COVID never happened. Teams want to see. I remember purchasing it because we were in Lake State that game for the WCA and get to the Bowling Green series. Only to find out 2 weeks later they'd pulled the entire season. That was heartbreaking because again, that team was one of the best Beaver teams. The team that I will say where if that season goes on, if they make a run for one of the best Beaver teams D1 era, the talent or the way they're playing, I will forever be on the train of they make a Frozen Four season isn't canceled. But
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll never know, and that's what sucks. I think they were like 13th in the pairwise when that season ended or something like that, when they postponed everything and then eventually ended up canceling it. I remember sweating through that series against Lake Superior State because we had to win that series. We would not have had enough pairwise points, I don't think, without getting a lot of help elsewhere with tournament runs. But you're right. I mean, that was probably one of the better Beaver teams we saw. And obviously they went back, like you said, and repeated that success the next year, but it was so much different. You didn't play anybody out of conference all season long. And there was like a very, very limited amount of fans. I don't know. It was Bridgeport, Connecticut, right? And I don't know that they allowed anybody but like family members in there.
It was very limited.
Yeah, that's what sucked. It's just like robbing the fan base and everybody of that experience of getting to go out there and at least cheer them on. But yeah, I think that we can get back to that level. There's a lot of young talent on the team right now that maybe we'll make that, run every 4 or 5 years as it's been right now. And we're approaching that number as we speak. So it's exciting times still. We're still trying to play for hardware, and hopefully we can make a run here down towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and Chase, will let you take off here, but we appreciate you coming on the podcast. Your first appearance on Beaver Banter, and this is normally a time when we have our guests on. We kind of give them an opportunity to like follow or like kind of mention any projects you got going on. So I guess the floor is yours. What's your final statement before we let you get out of here?
No, this is fun. I appreciate you guys letting me on. You guys go to the Mid-State whole propaganda account on Twitter. Otherwise, the project, I'm just a college kid trying to get through my last semester. And, that's about it. I appreciate you guys letting me on. This isn't the last time.
Yeah, we hope to we'll hope to get you back on here as we get going throughout the hockey season. There's a lot of Bemidji State hockey to go over throughout the next couple months, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, Chase, for coming on.
Hey, see you later.
All right, that's Chase of social media. How did we first come into contact with Chase? Was it over Twitter?
Yes. It was over Twitter. Yeah. He just started following the podcast. Well, really, before we even had the podcast page last season, he just started interacting with me during Beaver games, and now it's become more of a heavy thing. I talked. You guys
came together through your mutual frustration over the last 5 seconds of hockey games last year.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I've seen Chase a couple times. Like he said, he goes to almost every home game. I remember running into him when I was up watching the Michigan Tech series this past year. So yeah, it's always good to have fans. And obviously, if anybody else, if you want to interact, if you want somewhere to go to talk Beaver hockey, reach out to us. We've got avenues that we can get you aboard. Yeah. Any Beaver sport. It doesn't have to be just hockey. It could be anything. If you're a Beaver fan and you want to interact with other Beaver fans, we know the place to do it. So reach out to us. You want to
talk Bemidji State tennis? You can. We won't bring much intelligent conversation there, but we'll roll Beavs with you. So
yeah,
that's how it works.
So you want to touch quick on basketball before we roll out of here, CJ?
Oh my God, do we have to?
Yeah, it was a tough weekend, man. I guess let's just start with the men's because that was a bit more of a shocking result to me. They kind of got boat raced on both nights at home, where they have played pretty well. They'd only lost one game. It was a 2-point game in overtime to a top 2 team in the country in Minnesota State. And now, losing by 21 to Augustana, giving up almost 100 points in that game. And then 55-82 to Wayne State. Not the end of the world. They can still rebound from this. They can still, get a home playoff game and do everything that we've wanted them to do with this season. But this is a step back and a bit of a shocking result to see this type of a performance from BSU. And I think it just boils down to shooting. I mean, BSU only turned the ball over 5 times on Friday against Augustana, but they shot the ball 42% from the field, only 24% from 3-point range, and only 68% from downtown. They were out-rebounded by 8 in this game. It was just, it was just one of those games where it felt like everything Augustana was putting up was going down, and you just couldn't get very hot from the floor. John Sutherland, 8 of 12, with 20 points and 4 rebounds, but it just wasn't consistent enough from the team as a whole to really keep up with a hot shooting Augustana. And it's unfortunate, but I don't think it's anything necessarily that's crippling for the team. It was a little bit shocking. I think the more shocking result was seeing them have it happen again the next night, have such a dominant effort by Wayne State. And really, they didn't even shoot particularly well in that game, but it was even worse from Bemidji State from the field. It was 37%. The 3-point shooting was up to 34, and the free throw shooting was a measly 7 of 12 at 58%. So again, and there was 16 turnovers in that game. So there was a little bit more of an issue in the turnover department, but yeah, just a poor shooting weekend for the Beavers. So hopefully next weekend, now we've got Concordia St. Paul and Minnesota Duluth coming to town, or going on the road to play those two teams. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. But I think that's the main takeaway is just a poor shooting weekend. Concordia St. Paul not very good on the season, 3-9 in the conference, 8-10 overall. And of course, Minnesota Duluth, if you're going to want a chance to climb up into that top 4 and get a bye to Sioux Falls to the Pentagon, this is going to be a team you're going to want to beat. They're 8-4 right now. They're 4th in the conference. Bemidji State sitting in 7th in the conference at 6-6 after this last weekend. So we'll see. There's still plenty of time to make up ground, but you've got a pretty decently tough schedule to do so against. But we'll see. This doesn't really change my opinion that much of where Bemidji State basketball is at. I think they're still a decent team. They've got 10 wins on the season. That's not a terrible amount. I think it's just a tough weekend. It's one you're going to have to shake off and hope that it gets better shooting wise.
Yeah, I mean, this team is shot better than that. And I think it's, like you said, it's concerning that it happened 2 games in a row. And I guess you just, like you said, you have to shake it off and hope that that was just a one-off weird weekend kind of thing, that they were able to shoot the ball so poor. And you look at in the second half of that Wayne State game, they only scored 19 points in the second half. And when you're only scoring 55 points in a 40-minute college basketball game, that's not great. And I know that they had a little bit more of an output against Augustana, but the defense wasn't there at all. And I know that, again, sometimes the team just is shooting well and sometimes you're not. It's that finding that balance of, when is it to say, sometimes it's just not your night, and yeesh, that was really bad. And they're going to have to figure that out. And Concordia St. Paul should be the good bounce back game to do that. But then the only problem is you got to go up I-35 and play Duluth. And that's not an easy place to go up and win. So we're going to find out a lot about this Bemidji State team. They've now lost 3 out of their last 4. And really, if you want to go even, they've only won 2 games out of their last, 6. So again, it's not a great, it hasn't been a great stretch for them. If you look in the NSIC standings, they're at 6-6, which would cement them, as I'm doing math in my head here, 7th in the conference. Augustana right above them. Then there's Southwest, who they lost to both of those teams. Then you have Minnesota Duluth at 8-4. Minot State continues to go at 10-2. So I guess I'm wrong for thinking that they were going to fall off. And 11-1 for Minnesota State and MSU Moorhead at the top of the conference. There's still plenty of games. Bemidji State is right in the thick of things, but all of a sudden they went from having a nice little cushion to kind of being right back in the mix with everyone else.
Yeah, like I said, with a decently tough schedule. I mean, look at the next 4 games or 5 games that you play. 4 in a row after this Concordia St. Paul game are Minnesota Duluth, Minot State, MSU Moorhead, and Northern State. Minnesota Duluth, who is a top 4 team, Minot State, who you've beaten but is 3rd place, Moorhead, who beat you. Now you'll get them at home, but they're still
top 5 in the country. Yeah,
top 5 in the country, and Northern State, who beat you pretty handily in Aberdeen. So this is not an easy stretch for the basketball team to be at on the men's side. But yeah, I mean, it stinks to have that happen and to get swept at home. But you're a sweep away from being right back in the thick of it. So there's still nothing to hit the panic button about. I still think that they're going to make the tournament, and hopefully we can get through this little rough stretch here with 3 wins and really help solidify ourselves back with, the top pack in the NSIC.
Right. And, we'll just have to see. I think we pretty much just got to go play a game again and try and wash that taste out of the mouth of the out of the men's basketball team. Flipping things over to the women's side here. Overall on the season, they still have yet to find that first win in the NSIC. They lost 70-60 against Augustana and lost 58-51 against Wayne State. Both those games, they're relatively in the mix to win both of those, but ultimately they can't come out on top. If we look at that Augustana game, really that's just one where Bemidji State always just kind of trailed, and Augustana slowly kept building that lead up over the game. It felt like Augustana pretty much just kind of had control of that one. And then you look at the Wayne State game that they played, and that's when Bemidji State had a lead going into halftime, but only scored, actually had a lead going into the fourth quarter, but they got outscored in the fourth quarter 20-8. It's a plus 12, and you lose by 7 points. So that's one that you let get away in that game.
Yeah, I mean, these are two teams that were towards the bottom of the conference down there with BSU, and you're hoping that you could come away at home with one of these games. The Wayne State one looked pretty attainable, but yeah, you lost the fourth quarter by 12. And, if you're just looking at box scores and box score watching, I don't think BSU shot very well against Wayne State in that game. They did shoot better against Augustana. The turnovers were a bit of an issue against Wayne State. Or I'm sorry, against Augustana. I believe they turned the ball over 20 times in that game compared to Augustana's 10. The turnovers were a little bit more even in the Wayne State game. But again, what have I been hammering home has been the free throws, getting to the free throw line. You shot 8 free throws in both of these games. That's 2 per quarter on average. That's just not enough, especially
that's one trip to the line a quarter.
Yeah, one trip to the line a quarter. You were outshot, not in terms of makes, but outshot 50-16 from the free throw line again this weekend, including 30-8 against Wayne State. So again, being aggressive, getting to the free throw line, and maybe laying off the fouls a bit, not putting them on the free throw stripe 30 times in a game would probably help your instance against Wayne State especially.
Yeah, and it's not getting any easier now for the women's basketball team as they are going to face Concordia St. Paul and Minnesota Duluth, both on the road. If you look at Concordia St. Paul, they're currently 4th in the NSIC women's division with an 8-4 record, tied with UMary for that 4th spot. And then going down a little bit in that 6th spot is Minnesota Duluth at 7-5, tied with St. Cloud State in that conference record as well. So you have 2 tough road games coming up. Again, it's not to say that it's off the table for them to try and get a win in one of these 2 games, but it felt like if there was any weekend to try and get your season back on track, it was going to be that one. And you talk about, Ian, with the lack of getting to the free throw line, it's not so much of the fact of, you got to get foul bait or you got to try and work your way to the line, but it's just more of if Bemidji State wants to be a team that wants to play physical down low and they want to do things on the low block, they're going to need to be able to try and be physical. And a team that is good in that aspect can get to the free throw line a little bit as well. Ian, I see we have another guest on the podcast today on the video version.
She just jumped right on up there. She must want something.
She's got her taste.
Good for you. Would that be okay if somebody else got you whatever you wanted?
Dogs welcome on the Beaver Banter. Yeah.
We love dogs here, but
we love dogs here. But yeah, I mean, it's tough sledding for them because they're a team that doesn't shoot the 3 ball a ton, and they're a team that likes to play that inside game. And theoretically, you'd hope that would also mean you could get a little bit more trips to the free throw line, but they just can't right now.
Yeah, and I'm trying to pull up the statistics. I wonder if there is any free throw statistics for. There is. So let's go to free throws and let's just see where they rank in the conference, because it's been kind of an overlapping theme all season long for this team. It's free throws attempted. Let's see. Bemidji State, they're 13th in the conference. So they're not dead last, but they are down there. They've only attempted 227 free throws on the season. So and in terms of percentage, they are 13th. So they're making not quite enough free throws. Let's see, free throws attempted for the opponents. The issue is Bemidji State gives up the 3rd most free throws in the conference. So they're getting outshot at the free throw line by about 80 on the year. That is the main issue with what's going on here. So I think that, and not only can fix so much. It's not like getting to the free throw line is going to fix every problem that this team is having. I think that they're still not a very good shooting team overall. So they do have some other things that they need to work through, but in a close game against Wayne State, that especially is going to hurt you when you come down to the end of the game and you lose the fourth quarter by 12. Free throws are one of the biggest things you can look at. And in terms of, man, if we could have gotten to the free throw line a couple more times, we could have maybe stop some of their momentum, something like that. That's one of the biggest things that I think needs to improve. And then from there, we'll find the next best thing.
Good news is they have a chance to try and do that this week against Concordia St. Paul and Minnesota Duluth. It's going to be tough sledding, but that's why you play the game. So they have an opportunity to do that. They also have Minot State and MSU Moorhead coming up soon as well. So there's some games on the schedule here where they can try and pick a game off here, but you're starting to run out of opportunities here. Is you only have you only have 1 month, essentially 1 calendar month after this throughout February before all of a sudden we're starting to talk about the playoffs. So it's got to come somewhere. So there you go. This has been the Beaver Banter podcast. Ian, anything else we need to get off our chests here while we're on the pod?
No, I don't think so. I know that we will have an off week coming up here. I think that we've discussed, or maybe that we need to discuss a little bit more if we're going to do anything for that week or not. I will be on a giant boat in the middle of the Caribbean, so probably not too many opportunities to record anything there. So maybe we'll get something recorded and stash it away. I don't know. We'll discuss that. But next week there should still be a show. So stay tuned. Women's hockey, of course, $2 tickets, like we said.
Go to the game.
In Bemidji, it's a great opportunity for them to get some wins as well. So if you're in Bemidji, that I believe will be the only home action of the weekend. So get out to those games and support the BSU women's hockey team.
This has been the Beaver Banter podcast. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also follow us on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, Facebook and YouTube as well.